The winter wind moved softly through the streets of New York City, carrying with it the distant sound of traffic, laughter, and dreams too fragile to be spoken out loud. On a quiet corner near Times Square, under a flickering streetlight, stood a 17-year-old girl with a second-hand guitar and a voice that could make strangers forget where they were. Her name was Isabella Grace. Most people who passed by didn't know her name. They didn't know that she lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn with her mother. They didn't know that her father had left when she was 10, chasing his own broken dreams. They didn't know that Isabella practiced singing every night until her throat burned, whispering to herself, one day they will hear me. But on that cold evening, something was different. Isabella wasn't singing for money. She wasn't even singing for attention. She was singing because her heart was too full to stay silent. When Isabella was little, her mother used to sing her lullabies. Not perfect, not professional, but full of love. Music was the only thing that made their small home feel big. It filled the cracks in the walls and softened the silence when bills piled up on the kitchen table. At school, Isabella was quiet. Too quiet. Other kids called her invisible. Some laughed at her old clothes. Some said her dreams were too big for a girl like her. People like us don't become stars, one classmate once said. But Isabella never argued. She simply listened, and sang louder when she was alone. By the time she turned 16, she had discovered videos of auditions from shows like American Idol and The Voice Online. She watched ordinary people stand on huge stages and transform their lives in minutes. She would sit inches from the screen, eyes shining. If they can do it, maybe I can too. But auditions required money, travel, confidence, things Isabella felt she didn't have. So instead, she chose the streets. Every Friday evening, after finishing her shift at a small coffee shop, she would take the subway to Manhattan. She would stand on the same corner and sing her favorite songs. One of them was, 1,000 Years, by Christina Perri. The first time she sang it in public, her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped her guitar. Only 3 people stopped to listen. But she kept going. Week after week, more people paused. Some recorded short clips. Some dropped a few dollars into her guitar case. A few even cried. And Isabella realized something powerful. Her voice could make people feel. One snowy night, as she began singing an original song she had written called Broken But Breathing, the street was quieter than usual. Snowflakes landed gently on her hair and guitar strings. Halfway through the song, her voice cracked, not from fear, but from emotion. The lyrics spoke about being underestimated, about growing up without a father, about watching her mother struggle and promising herself she would change their lives. She didn't notice the man standing across the street, listening carefully. His name was Daniel Harper. He was a small-time music producer who had once worked with artists connected to Columbia Records, but after a few failures, he had stepped away from the spotlight. That night, he wasn't looking for talent. But talent found him. When Isabella finished singing, there was silence. Then applause. Real applause. Daniel walked toward her slowly. "That was your song?" he asked. Isabella nodded nervously. "It's not perfect," she said quickly. "I'm still learning." Daniel smiled. "Perfect is boring. Real is unforgettable." He handed her his card. For a moment, Isabella thought it was a joke. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. This was the kind of story she watched on YouTube, not the kind she lived. She went home that night unable to sleep. Her mother held the card in her hands and whispered, "Maybe this is your moment." But moments are scary. The next week, Isabella stood in a small recording studio for the first time in her life. The microphone in front of her looked expensive, fragile, important. Her reflection in the glass showed a girl who still doubted herself. Daniel's voice came through the headphones. "Sing it like you're telling your story to the world." So she closed her eyes. And she sang. Not softly, not carefully, but honestly. The recording of Broken But Breathing was uploaded to social media 2 weeks later. At first, only a few hundred views. Then a few thousand. Then something unexpected happened. A popular influencer shared it. Within days, the video crossed 1 million views. Comments flooded in. "Who is she? This voice gave me chills. She deserves a record deal. I cried listening to this." Isabella sat on her bed staring at the screen, hands shaking. She wasn't invisible anymore, but with attention came pressure. Interviews, messages, criticism. Some people said she was overrated. Others claimed her story was fake. For the first time, Isabella understood that dreams come with storms. One night, Overwhelmed by negative comments, she almost deleted everything. "I'm not strong enough for this," she whispered. Her mother sat beside her and said something she would never forget. "Baby, the world will always have noise. But your voice is stronger than noise." So Isabella chose courage. She began posting more covers, songs by Adele and Billie Eilish, adding her own emotional twist. Each video gained millions of views. Then came the email, an official invitation to audition for America's Got Talent. Isabella stared at the screen, heart pounding. This was it, the stage she had imagined for years. The night of the audition, backstage lights felt blinding. Contestants practiced nervously. Some warmed up their voices. Others prayed. When her name was called, Isabella walked onto the stage trying not to let her legs shake. The judges smiled politely. "What will you be singing tonight?" One asked. "An original song," she replied. The audience murmured. Original songs were risky. She took a deep breath. And began. The first note floated through the theater like a fragile promise. By the second verse, the room was silent. By the chorus, tears shimmered in the eyes of strangers. She wasn't just singing. She was telling her story. When the final note ended, there was a moment of stillness. Then the entire audience stood up. A standing ovation. One judge pressed the golden buzzer. Gold confetti rained down as Isabella covered her mouth in disbelief. Back home, her mother cried in front of the television. The performance went viral worldwide. News outlets called her the girl with the healing voice. Music blogs compared her emotional style to Adele's early days. Streaming platforms requested her songs. Within a year, Isabella signed a record deal. Her first album debuted in the top 10. She performed on stages she had only seen on screens before. She traveled across the country. She sent money home. She moved her mother into a better apartment. But success didn't change her heart. On her first major tour, she returned to the exact street corner where it all began in New York City. Without cameras, without announcements, just her guitar, she sang, broken but breathing, again. People gathered, not knowing they were witnessing a star who once stood in that exact spot as a nobody. After finishing, she looked at the crowd and said softly, "Never let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter." Years later, when interviewers asked Isabella what the secret to her success was, she never mentioned luck. She said, "Three things: pain, persistence, and believing when no one else does." Her journey wasn't just about fame. It was about a girl who refused to stay invisible. A girl who turned sidewalks into stages. A girl who sang through doubt, through fear, through criticism. And in doing so, she reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful voices come from the quietest hearts. On cold nights, if you walk through certain streets in New York, you might hear a young girl singing under a streetlight. Maybe she's nervous. Maybe she feels unseen. Maybe she's waiting for her moment. And somewhere, in a beautiful apartment overlooking the city lights, Isabella Grace smiles. Because she knows something that girl doesn't yet know. Dreams don't belong to the rich. They don't belong to the confident. They don't belong to the lucky. They belong to the brave. And sometimes, all it takes is one song.